Hello, welcome to another Coding Rainbow coding challenge. This challenge has no time constraint. I've got a stopwatch going. We're going to see how long it takes. I'm going to go move quickly, but not going to rush, and we're going to feel relaxed and meditate on what we're going to program here. So today, what I'm going to program in JavaScript using p5.js is the game Space Invaders. Classic Atari game, I believe. You can see some images from the original game. I'm going to be using simple shapes to represent the things in the game, and actually, I'm going to create a different version of it. I'm going to call it Flower Invaders, and instead of aliens, there will be flowers, and instead of bullets, you will shoot water to water the flowers, because that's how I feel today in my world of rainbows and programming. Okay, so I have to just get started. So the first thing that I need to do is I have a blank canvas here of code, and I'm going to add, I'm going to type it here, I'm going to add function setup, and I'm going to add function draw, and I am going to say, create canvas 600, 400, and I'm going to say, background 51. So I'm using the p5.js framework, which has a setup and draw function. Setup starts the program, draw loops over and over again for animation, and I'm going to, I minimize that. I'm going to go back to the browser here, hit refresh, and you can see there's my canvas. So let's think about this. Let's come over here for a second and think about how we're going to organize the code for this. So in my Flower Invader program, I need to have a bunch of flowers. I need to have one watering can, and I need to have water things. And maybe I need a bunch of those. So I need an array for flowers. I need an array for the water. And I need one object for the ship. We're just going to call that a spaceship. It's a watering spaceship. This is what I'm doing today. Okay, so let's do the spaceship first. That's probably the easiest thing. And what I'm going to do for that, and I'm just going to go right ahead. I'm using the Sublime text editor, but I'm going to make a new file, and I'm going to call it ship.js. And I'm going to write a constructor function which gives an x value. And I'm going to say width divided by 2. So this ship is automatically going to start in the center of the window. What does it need? It moves left and right. So although I guess I'm going to move it left and right with the keyboard. So this is really all I need. Now I also need a function to show it. And I'm going to make it a rectangle because I'm lazy and I'm figuring out how to draw a triangle at the bottom. It's going to cause me too much of a headache. So I'm going to make a rectangle at this.x. And where does the rectangle need to be? At the bottom of the window, height. But maybe the rectangle is going to be like 20 pixels high. So it sits at the bottom, but 20 pixels up. And then maybe it's 20 pixels wide and 20 pixels high, and it's going to be white. And now, so this is a very simple idea of a constructor function. I can make a ship object, and that ship object has a show function. If you're wondering why I'm using a constructor function rather than making just like an object literal, I just like constructor functions, and I made a whole video tutorial about them, which I will hopefully link to somehow if you're watching this. Okay, so now I need to go back to my main sketch. Ooh boy, I lost that. Oops, this is like a irrelevant file. Sorry about that. And I need to go back to my main sketch, and I need to create a variable. I'll call it ship. And now I can make an instance of that object, new ship, and then I can say ship.show. And now I added that code. I should be able to hit refresh. We spent about 3 minutes doing this so far. I can hit refresh, and boy, I have some sort of error. So look, ship is not defined. So why is ship not defined? I certainly defined it right here in this particular JavaScript file. Well, one thing you can't forget to do is when you add a new JavaScript file is to also make sure a reference to that JavaScript file is included in your HTML file itself. That's what the browser is actually loading to know what all the JavaScript it should look at. Now we can see there's the ship. It's right there at the bottom. And now what I need to do is figure out a way to move it left and right. So one way to do that here, since I'm using p5.js, is to add a function called keyPressed. And so in keyPressed, I can check. This is an event that's triggered anytime a user presses a key on the keyboard. And I can check if the key code is right arrow. And I can say ship.left. Else, if the key code is left arrow. Oh boy. So I got to get my equal signs right. So first of all, How many equal signs should I be using here? 100% not one. One equal sign is for assignment. X equals 5. If I want to ask the question, does x equal 5, I can use 2 equals. And if I want to be really, really serious about it, I'm going to use 3 equals. I'm a little off topic here, but I'll just point out what I mean. This is true. This is not true. So, oops. The first one is true. The second one is not true. Think about that for a little bit and come and ask me in the comments if that doesn't make sense to you. Okay, so coming back here, I'm going to then now say ship.right. So if, amusingly, I'm moving the ship left when I hit the right arrow and right when I move the left arrow. But actually, I don't like this. First of all, what left and right? Oh, this is some magic automatic thing that happens on a computer. When you call a function called left, the thing moves to the left. No, this is the idea of something I'm going to make up that's part of the shift. But it would make much more sense for me to have one single function that moves the ship. And then I could give it an argument to tell it whether to go left or right. So I'm going to just say ship.move, 1 meaning move to the right, ship.move, -1 meaning move to the left. And now I can go into the ship object and add that function. Move equals function. I'm going to make a variable called dir. That's the argument, getting the 1 or the -1. And I can say this.x plus equals dir. So when I press left or right, the ship moves left or right. So now if we go back and hit refresh, click in here, and you can see there, it's really moving. Can I hold the keyboard down? All right, we've got some issues here, interaction-wise. Let's at least let it move 5 pixels. The other thing I want to do is draw the rectangle via its center, and then make it a little bit, maybe make it a little bit taller. So you can see this is my watering can thing. So I don't know why, it's interestingly enough, so boy, all these little details that you don't think about when you start these projects. Oh, it's so simple. But now actually, do I want it to permanently move to the left and the right? How do I stop it if I'm holding down the key? Maybe we'll solve those problems later, but I'm going to just keep moving for right now. So I need to improve the interaction here about actually when I'm holding it down, and there is a way to do that. I know what to do. I'm going to hold that off till later. I'm going to come back and fix that because the next thing I want to do is add the flowers. So if you recall, the flowers are things that live above, and I need an array of them. So I'm going to make a flower object. Come back over here. I'm going to make another new file. And I'm going to make another new file. I'm going to call this flower.js. And I'm going to make a function. Boy, this is going to take a long time. We're at 7 minutes, but we'll see how long it takes. I'm going to make a flower object, and the flower object is also going to have an x. I'm going to give it some arbitrary location and a y, and it also is going to have. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to duplicate this because so much about it is going to be the same. And then I'm just going to rename this to flower, and I'm going to also give it a y to start it somewhere. And this is good, but I want it to be an ellipse. I want it to be purple, because I'm thinking about purple today. I think that's about purple. This should say this.y. Anybody who, hopefully somebody will watch this video and make a really nice, pretty flower design, or I could download a flower image. And I'm going to take out the move function for right now. So we can see now, now I have a flower object, basically the same idea. And what I want to do in Sketch now is make, just to test that this is working, make a single flower object. So I'm going to say new flower, and I'm also going to say flower.show. So now I made that new flower object. I've got this. Now I'm going to refresh, and we can see, flower is not defined. Boy, I cannot remember this. I can never remember index.html. We've got to add a reference to flower.js now. Here we go. Look, I've got a watering can ship and a flower, and I can move my ship, and I have but one flower is not enough. I want to have an array of flowers. So this is, by the way, with the ship, I probably didn't really need to use a JavaScript constructor function, but I'm going to make the case that it really makes a lot of sense to use it with the flower, because what I'm going to do now is say, actually what I want is to have an array called flowers. And instead of having one flower, I'm going to write a loop. I starts at 0, I is less than 5, I plus plus, and I'm going to say flowers index I equals a new flower. And then here I'm going to take this and I'm going to put all this in draw and I'm going to say flowers index I dot show. So now, and let me move this key pressed out of the way because we can come back to it later. So this is the structure. I have a single ship. I have an array of flowers. Aliens if you're really programming Space Invaders. And I'm making 5 flower objects and showing them all. So let's run this again. It looks like there's only one flower. Why? Because they're all being drawn in exactly the same place. Because here I have hard-coded the location of the flowers. So what do I need to do? This is good, right? I actually need to use constructor arguments. So if I add an x and a y there, those are different x's and y's than the this.x and the this.y that are part of the actual flower object. They're these temporary variables that live as arguments to the constructor that receive a value. And then I can fill, say this.x equals x and this.y equals y. And now I can go back to the main program and say, make me a flower at random width 20. And if I refresh, you can see, oh, I got a bunch of flowers at random locations. But maybe I want to space them out evenly. So what I can do a little math to do that. I can say like, and where did I have it? I had it at like 60. And I can say I times, I don't know, how big are the flowers? The flowers are 60. I times 80 plus 80. I'm making up some math. And then they're kind of spaced out, right? So the first one, I times 80 is 0. And it looks like I could fit easily like a couple more on here. So let's make 6. That one more. See? Whoops. Oh, you know what? This is terrible. Look what I've done here. I made it add an extra one, but this here, I should never hard code the value 5 here. I needed to hard code the value 6 here because the array is empty when it starts. But here, I really should be using flowers.length. So good thing I found that. Whoops. Hit save, and now hit refresh. OK, so this is a pretty good start. I have a bunch of flowers. I have my watering can. So what I'm going to do now is I need to, oh boy, 12 minutes in. But we're making good progress here. What I need to do now, I'm just checking the chat to see if everybody, the timer's a bit small. Oh boy, you can't see that. Whatever. I got to work on my timer. I shouldn't look at the chat. Keep going down. OK, there's a live chat. I'm doing this live, but most of you will be watching this not live. Sorry to have to say that. OK, so now I need to add the water. This is going to be the trickiest part, right? Because I dynamically need to make objects that emit from this one, and I don't know how many they're going to be. Like I know I have one ship, and I know I have 6 flowers, but I don't know how many water particles I have. Water droplets. So first let's just make the drop. So once again, I'm basically doing the same thing. I'm going to make a new file, and I'm going to call it a drop.js. Whoops, and I have to rename that. Sorry, everybody. Drop.js. And I've got to delete this. Sorry, everyone. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the flower, which has a lot of stuff that's useful for me. I'm going to make the water a kind of bluish color and make it a small circle. And I'm going to call this a drop. And I'm going to remember right now to add that to the HTML file. Oh, not forgetting this time. Yeah, in your face HTML file. That was very rude. I don't want to be mean to the HTML file. I'm very sorry. You are my friend, and I like you. And I just was trying to make a joke, but then I said something a little bit mean, and I don't like that. Edit that out of this video. Don't actually edit it out. I don't know who I'm talking to anymore. OK, so now I have the drop. So the tricky thing about the drop is, for sure, we can be a little bit advanced about this, and we can probably say we know that the drop, when it moves, it should, the y value should, -1, right, -1 moves it up, right? The y value should change. So I kind of know the drop has an x and a y. It's a small little circle, probably 20 pixels is even too big. It's a small little bluish circle, and it's going to move up. So this is my drop object. So let's just get one drop object here just to test that it's working. So I'm going to add a drop object, and then I'm going to say drop.show and drop.move. So I'm just adding, there's a ship that's showing, a drop that's showing and moving, and flowers that are showing. So if I refresh this sketch, now I don't see that drop anywhere. Why not? So let's think about this. We got to debug this. One thing that I would do to debug this is let's not look at the ship or the flowers to just see the drop. Anyone see a drop anywhere? I don't see a drop anywhere. Let's go back to the code and into drop.js. Okay, big problem. The drop needs values to give it a starting location. Well, that's something I clearly forgot. So I want to make the drop. Let's just put it in the middle right now, just so we see that it works. There we go. There's the drop. And you know, I don't like how this drop is looking. So I'm going to say no stroke and make it a little bit bigger and also a little bit brighter, because it's a bright day today. Okay, so there's the drop moving kind of slowly. Probably this kind of thing would move a lot faster. This should be a variable, but you get the idea. That's working. Now, let's put the ship back in. I'm going to show the ship again. Now, how do we get that drop to start from where the ship is? Okay. So first of all, what are we doing here? The drop doesn't exist. The drop only exists maybe if I hit the space bar. So I've done this before. I think I can kind of skip a few steps here and know that what I want is an array. And in the same way that, and I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to comment this out. In the same way that I have this loop to go through all of the flowers, what I want to have is a loop to go through all of the drops and say drops index I dot show, drops index I dot move. So now I'm saying however many drops there are, if there's 0 drops, don't show or move any. If there's 5, show or move all 5. If there's 10, show and move all 10. However many there are, call the show and move function. So when this program first starts, there are none. How do I add them? I need to add drops the moment the user presses the space bar. So now we're coming back to our key pressed, and I can also say now here, if key equals space, there's probably another way to do this, but I'm going to just say if the key equals the space, then I'm going to say var drop equals a new drop, width divided by 2, height divided by 2, and drops.push drop. So whenever the user hits the space bar, make a new drop object and add it to that drops array. And that drops array will just expand magically. Okay, so let's run this. And now if I hit the space bar, oh, drops is not defined. What happened? What did I miss? Always with an error. Line 37, drops is not defined. Oh, I called it drop. I want to call it drops. And this should say drops, and that should say drops. So I was just being inconsistent about my typing, but I fixed that now. Okay, here we go. Ready? And spacebar, 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 spacebar. So you can see every time I hit the spacebar, I get a new drop. But I need to do something more. I need to connect its starting location where that ship is. And you know what? This is going to actually be the easiest thing in the world to do. Because all I need to do is say, instead of hard coding in width divided by 2, height divided by 2, all I need to do is give it the ship's, start that drop at the ship's X location and maybe the bottom of the screen. And now I'm going to run this again, and you're going to see, right, the water droplets are always coming from the ship, no matter where the ship is. And I really want to fix the way I'm moving the ship, but right now I'm going to leave that. You can see, woo, drops. And there's so much more I could do with this, but this is the basic idea. We got to put those flowers back in. Okay, so let's put the flowers back in. And now, a couple things. The flowers should really move. I think in Space Invaders, the aliens go like this. And I'm already almost at 20 minutes, so I'm not sure if I'm going to add that feature to this. And maybe that'll be like bonus exercise for you to try to do, and I'll certainly post a solution with that. But let's at the very least right now, get the drops to hit the flowers and make something happen. Okay, and there's a couple other things I want to talk about with this drops array. Like, in theory, there are still these drops that are now thousands and hundreds of pixels high, and I can't, by the way, my arm, it's very sad how my arm's cut off the way I have this set up, but what can you do? Okay, well, I lost track of what I was doing. Now, let's look here. We have a bunch of drops that are showing and moving. We have a bunch of flowers that are showing. Well, what do we also want to do for every drop? For every drop, I want to look and see if the drop intersects a flower. If the drop and the flower are overlapping, if the drop hits the flower, maybe make the flower bigger to water it or something like that so it grows. Of course, I could make it disappear, which would be the Space Invaders thing. So let's see. So that should indicate to you that I'm saying every drop should check to see if it hit any of the flowers. So for every drop, I want to check every flower, which means I need this kind of loop also inside here. Now, here's a big thing. I don't want to use I in two places. If I'm putting this loop, I is for the outer loop. So for every drop, I really do want to check. I'm going to use J to check every flower. And I'm going to say something like, if drop hits flower. And that's not correct, right? Because what I want to say is if drop I hits flower J, then, and I'm just going to put a console log right now. So just to see if this idea works. Again, I'm like programming this as if there's a magical world where you write a function for a drop like hits, and then you just run the code and it works. Obviously, if I hit refresh here right now, the first thing it's going to tell me is oh, flower is not defined. Yeah, flowers. That's the first thing it's going to tell me. The next thing it's going to tell me is drops index I dot hits is not a function, right? Because I've got to write that function. So where does this function hits go? It goes in the drop object, which is not this file, which is this. This is the long one, by the way. So I want a function called hits. And what am I checking to see if the drop hits? I'm checking to see if the drop hits a particular flower. And how do I know if those two things intersect? So what I want to know is, first thing I need to do is I want to know the distance between this drop's x and y and what? The flowers x and y. And how do I know if, you know, I've definitely made videos about this before, but really, really quickly, just to very, very quickly go over this, if I have two circles and I know the distance between them, I can determine if they are intersecting based on the relative difference between their distance and the sum of their two radii. Right? You can see here, if the distance is longer than the sum of their two radii, they're farther apart. If it's shorter, they're overlapping. So what I want to say is if, and I need a little bit more code space here, if the distance is less than this object's radius, which I'll call r, plus the flower's radius, which I'll also call r, then return true. Otherwise, return false. So I'm writing a function that's sending back true when the drop hits the flower, sending back false when it does not. R, that's something I made up. If I make something up, I've got to actually add it. So this drop is drawn as a circle with a diameter of 16. So I want to make this actually now a radius, this dot r times 2, this dot r times 2, because this should really be a variable. And this dot r equals 8. So the radius is 8. I draw it as the radius times 2, and now I can check the radius there in the drop. And I want to do the same exact thing for the, say it with me. I want this dream to be the Mr. Rogers somehow. Can you say flower? No, that's not how it works. Whatever. Sorry. Do I have a dream to be Mr. Rogers? Did I just say that? That's a little bit weird. Maybe it's not weird. Maybe that's a nice thing to want to be. Okay. 30. This dot r times 2. This dot r times 2. Okay, so now here we go. So now, oops, in the drop. Where's the drop? Where's the drop? So now I've got this going. Let's refresh, and I'm going to position my watering thing below the flower. I'm going to hit the space bar, and look, it's watering. Now notice it console logged watering 15 times. Why? Because this drop started moving up at the flower. It hit here, it's intersecting, then it moved here, it's still intersecting, then it moved here, it's still intersecting. So what I probably want to do is have a mechanism for getting rid of the drop once it hits the flower. Okay, so boy, there's so many things to add to these. You can't believe, this could just be for an hour. But you know, maybe I should just keep going with this and actually make every feature happen. But I'm going to keep going for now. Okay, oh, people, I'm checking the chat, and I really shouldn't do that in the middle of these videos. Okay, so what am I doing here? Okay, so now in the main sketch, okay, if the drops hits the flowers, console log watering. So what I need to do now is, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to have the flower grow, and I'm going to remove the drop. So you could also, seeing how I remove the drop, you could also make a version where you remove the flower, which would be the more traditional Space Invaders thing. So I need to do a couple things. I need to say something like flowers index j dot grow, because that flower should grow. And I need to say something like drops index I dot remove. Because, and now, anytime something turns blue, I have to be a little bit skeptical of whether or not I should use that word, because it's probably a keyword in JavaScript, and it might be fine, but let's think of something else. Drops index evaporate. That's a good name for a water function, evaporate. So I'm going to grow the flower and evaporate the drop. So let's do these things one at a time. I'm going to comment that out, and this means now I need to add a function, this.grow, to the flower object. And I'm going to say this.r equals this.r plus 2. Just gets 2 pixels bigger. So let's look at this, and look at that. So this is actually kind of a nice effect, because oh, we've been overtaken by the purple-pink flower of glorious wonderfulness. But you can see here that without the drop being removed, it's behind that flower. And if the flower is growing, and if the drop is moving while the flower is growing, it never leaves the flower, and you have this infinitely growing flower, which is kind of nice. But I'm going to correct that problem. So let's add this other function back in, drops.evaporate, which means I need a function called evaporate. Now, what am I really doing here? What I need to determine, basically, I need a drop to have, I could do a couple things. One is I could just set its position like way off screen. I could say this.x equals 5,000. Yeah, that would kind of be good, because you wouldn't see it. It would be to the users if it was gone. But it'd probably be better to actually remove it from the array. So what I'm going to do is set like a flag, basically, to know. So I'm going to say like this.toDelete equals false. So when, and maybe I don't need to say toDelete, I'll just call it delete. Oh, bad idea, it turned red. That's got to be even worse than, this camera's going to shut off in like 2 seconds. I can like, nope, because I'm at a half an hour. These cameras stay on only for a half an hour. Okay, so I'm going to set up a variable that's going to automatically start as false. And I'm going to set that variable to true. And, this is probably a bunch of extra steps and maybe a little bit redundant, but this is going to set me up for other possibilities, because maybe, I need to do other things later. So what I want to do is basically have a variable in the object that knows whether it's something that's valid and should continue to show and move, or something that I should delete. Because the object can't delete itself. The deleting has to happen in the main part of the program where the array is being managed. So what I'm going to do now is show you how to deal with that. And I could say, this is totally unnecessary, but to make things a little bit clearer and more simple, I'm just going to have a completely separate loop down here, which is exactly this same loop. And I'm just going to say, if drops index I dot toDelete, right? If this particular drop is something that should be deleted, then what do? I want to just remove that drop from the array. And the way that you do that in JavaScript is with the splice function. The splice function splices something out of an array, and I need to give it which element out of the array do I want to splice, which is, in this case, I, and I need to give it how many elements. Do I want just that I, or also the one after? And in this case, I want just that I, so I say 1. So now we should be able to run this, and you'll see, right? It's just getting bigger, and those drops are being removed from the array. Now, this totally worked and didn't have any problems, but I really did something that's a little bit problematic. When you're deleting things, and I have a separate video about this, so maybe I'll refer you to that somehow in the description. But when you're removing stuff from an array, if you're marching through the array forward and you delete something, and then the array ka-chunks back, contracts, and you move forward again, you actually could skip elements by accident. So this merits probably a longer discussion, but I'm going to save that for another video. But so it's generally a good idea in this case to walk through the array backwards. And how do you walk through an array backwards? I start at the end, length minus 1. I go down by 1, and I go all the way down to 0. So it didn't really matter, because if I missed one, I'll catch it the next time around. It's happening 60 frames per second. But now you can see, here we go. And I can grow these flowers. So in a way, this is kind of like, even at 30 minutes, this is the basic core idea of Space Invaders with some modification in flowers and water. Now, I sort of would like to keep going. I'm looking at the chat because people are asking questions, but I'll have to look at those after. I'd like to keep going to add a few more features, but let me tell you what those features are. So number one is I would like the invaders to move. The flowers, excuse me. And I would like to make the interaction of the ship be a little, this is like too awkward, this is not working for me. I want to be able to hold the key down, and when I release the key, have it stop moving. So I want to fix those two things. However, I might suggest to you, stop this video now, try to add those things yourself, and then come back and watch to see how I did it. But since if anyone's still watching this video 30 minutes in, thank you very much. Okay, so let's add those things, because it's not too much to do. First, let's move the flowers. So if we look at the flower constructor function, which sort of represents like a template for that flower object, it has a function called grow, which grows the radius. It has a function called show, which draws it, but it has no function to let it move. So I think we should write a function called move. And how should it move? It needs to say this.x equals this.x plus something. And this.y equals this.y plus something. Now, if I'm right, if I think about Space Invaders, how it works, these all kind of move together, and then they move down and move together that way. So ultimately, I probably don't really need each object to have its own variables for how it moves, because they don't all move separately, they all move together. But maybe I'll build that into the program anyway, and then they'll all just move together anyway. Boy, this is actually going to be quite tricky, because when one of them hits, they all have to move. Anyway, but it's okay. Let's add a this.x. I'm going to call it x dir for x direction, and this.y dir for y direction. Yeah, this could be done more simply, I think, but I'm going to just go with this right now. So I'm going to say this.x dir equals 1 and this.y dir equals 0, just to sort of see what happens. And I'm going to go back to Sketch, and I'm going to say here, in addition to showing all the flowers, have them move. So let's refresh, and you can see the flowers are moving. Now the issue is when one of them gets to the right side, they need to all move down and start moving to the left. I could do something tricky like only check the right edge one, which I know is the last one in the array. I'm sort of tempted to do that. But let me be methodical about this, and I'm going to say var right equals flowers index I dot oh, this is tricky. Okay, I got an idea. Boy, this is really tricky. What I want to do, I need an algorithm to check if any of the flowers have hit the right edge. So the first thing I want to assume is that none of the flowers have hit the right edge. If flowers index I, and I should build this into a function, but I'm just going to do this right here. If flowers index I dot x is greater than width, right equals true. So this will actually work. This wasn't as tricky. As long as I create that variable up here, if any of them hit the right side, I just set that variable right equals true. And now at the end, I can say if right is true, then what do I want to do? I want to loop through them all again and set their x dir to -1. You know what I'm going to do? This I should really build in a function. I'm kind of doing this thing where I prefer to not have any stray code out here. I want everything to be built into the object. This is going to be too much. So what I want to do is I'm going to call this function shift down. And I'm just doing my indentation here. So basically, if any of the flowers hit the right edge, I want all the flowers to shift down and start moving to the left. So if I go back into my flower object, I actually don't need this y direction variable. I'm going to just get rid of that. And I'm going to say this dot shift down equals function. And what do I do here? The two things I want to happen is I want the y values to move down, and I want the direction to move in a different direction. So I say this dot x dir times equals -1, right? Because I'm reversing it, 1 will now become -1. And I can also say this dot y plus equals, I don't know, let's move it down by r. So in this case, we should see now, it's the edge. Ooh, r is not defined. The classic horrible JavaScript error, right? What is it here? It's this dot r, not r, because it's the object's r. So now it's moving over to the right, hits the right, it shifts down, and now it's going to move over to the left. So all I need to do is also have something to the left. So I should really actually, now that I think about it, I feel like I'm talking to myself. Is anybody still watching this video? I can't imagine anybody is. Okay, so now if I go back to Sketch, actually what do I want? I don't want just to check if it hits the right. I just want to check if it hits an edge. So what I want to know is flowers.x is greater than width, or flowers index I dot x is less than 0. Either edge is true. If edge, shift them all down. So now, here we go, flowers. Hit the edge. Flower dance, hit the edge. There we go. Now, water those flowers as they're coming down at me. Okay, this is too much fun to do the flower Space Invaders watering dance. Okay, I would really like those flowers to have a little bit of alpha. It's kind of bothering me that they don't, even though I don't have any visual design sensibility and a bone in my body. Okay, it's a little bit nicer. Oh, they're kind of dark, but they'll be nicer when they overlap. I'm going to make them brighter. There, see, I just wanted that, and I don't want them to have a stroke. Okay, I'm off the beaten path here. The last thing I want to do to this is make the interaction more seamless. I hate this that I can't hold down the key and have the thing move. So I need to figure out how to do this. So let's look at what's happening here. This here is a singular event. Ship move to the right, ship, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Let's key press, the global function key pressed in P5 is a single event. If I press the key, it moves it to the right. Pressing the key as a single event doesn't matter if I'm holding it down. So what I want to do here is basically what I want to do is permanently move the ship to the right, which actually isn't going to be that hard to fix, because all I need to do is essentially have a ship.move function that's always being called. And in here, I want to call this now set direction. So the idea is that the ship is always moving, but I only am setting the direction when I'm pressing the key. So in other words, this is always happening, but now I need a new function, this.setDir equals function. So notice what I've done here. I've written a new function that receives a value and sets this object's x direction to that value. Well, that means that that object's x direction now needs to be used inside the move function, and what? I need a new variable part of that ship, which is x direction, which I will start at 0. So watch this. Now when I hit refresh, I can press the key and it's moving. Now the problem is when I let go of the key, it's still moving. Now this might be the interaction you want for some games and some things, but probably not this one. What I want to do now, and this is actually quite easy, is I just want to add the key released event. And all I have to do now is ship.setDir 0, because when I lift the key, stop moving. And I could check, which key was released, but this I can just say any key that's released, stop moving. And so now we can see this, I can do this, and now I can actually play this. Now there's a problem. Whenever I release the space bar, it also stops it from moving. So maybe I should at least correct that. So I could say, as long as key is not equal to space. My phone is buzzing. Like, stop this. Did the audio stop? No, okay. You can see now I can play this game, and I can continue to move with the spacebar. Okay, so loads of fun. This is 40 minutes programming Space Invaders, but with flowers. So here's what I would love for anybody. So I got to get this code online. It's going to take a while, but by the time this video is there, hopefully there'll also be a link to the code and links to other videos that are relevant. What I would love is for anybody who watched this and learned how to program this, add, see what you can add to this. Can you add a score? Can you add different levels? Can you have 2 rows of flowers or invaders or whatever it is you're making? You can see I'm still missing a lot of pieces, but the core basic game mechanic is here. So thanks very much for watching this Space Invaders / Flower Invaders coding challenge.